Let's party.
Well, hello everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Party Loaded podcast. It is Party Loaded episode 226 for Wednesday night at 8 p.m. Australian Western Standard Time on Wednesday the 22nd of July, which means something very important. It means A, it is time for another episode of Party Loaded, and B, it is also time to do something very important in just a moment. But I'll tell you what that is after I introduce tonight. We have Matt, the Game Dad Diet, joining me on my, what is this direction anymore?
I think it's your right.
I'm massively turned around here because we got Christian up above me tonight. Christian Bolson Brown up on the top of the pyramid scheme of the loaded. Yeah, I don't know what's going on. Hey guys, it is.
Hey, how's it going?
So before I forget, and before we sort of jump into too much content tonight, the thing I wanted to mention is that it is 8:02 right now on the 22nd. So there's a very, very important job that everybody needs to do. So if you're catching this live, you can do this immediately. If you're catching this later, maybe you're driving in the car, maybe you're on your bike or something like that, don't careen off the road. Make sure you park, find a safe spot, don't impede oncoming traffic or anything crazy like that. But as soon as you got a second, I want you to go and fire up Steam, and I want you to go to the search bar and type in the word Necrobarista, and I want you to check out the game from our good friends over at Route 59 that has literally just gone live on sale 3 minutes ago, in fact. We did have Damon Reese, who's been working on the narrative content for that game on the show, many episodes back now. I think it was probably at least 18 months or so. Yeah. And this game's been in kind of release purgatory for a while now, but it's finally hit today. So, I'm not shilling it because of just friends. I'm doing it also because I'm confident it is going to be a cracker. So,
have you seen the Metacritic?
It's sitting at like around 90 or something. Yeah,
it's 82, but like it's sitting right in between Ghost of Tsushima and the new Paper Mario.
Nice,
right in between them.
That's not a terrible spot to be starting.
And they some friends were making the joke that it's got a higher review score than Wii Fit. So
sure.
It's dethroned Wii Fit already.
Pinnacle stuff. Yeah. Nice.
I'm looking forward to playing it.
Yeah, no, it's going to be good. For anyone who's sort of into JRPGs in particular, seems like it carries a lot of that flavor and sort of theme.
Visual novel.
Yeah. It's set in an Australian sort of setting, a fantastical version of Melbourne in particular. So yeah, I'm hanging out for it. It's going to be fun to do this weekend, I think. So.
Oh yeah. Absolutely.
So yeah, what else? What's been going on, guys? Adrian is not with us tonight because he's not feeling 100%, but that's all right. We've got plenty to chat about instead. I think we've probably done a fair bit of gaming with him this week, so we kind of know what's been going on. So
yeah, that's true. We can speak for him.
Yeah.
Like I can put on my angriest sounding voice and talk about my obsession with crabs.
That's
perfect.
And how much you hate Fallout 76. Good, we've covered all bases. Adrian's virtually
perfect.
here. Yeah,
Adrian's virtually here.
Nice. He did say he might be hanging out in chat later, so we'll give him crap then. Anyway,
you need to come up with a really offensive, disgusting metaphor for something.
Yes.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Usually involving vomiting and regurgitation.
Yeah.
Look, there he is.
There he goes. He's in chat. Nice. All right, Christian, do you want to kick us off tonight? What have you been playing this week? What's going on?
I've just been playing more Destiny 2. Mm-hmm. It's to the point where my brain feels a bit like mush from playing so much Destiny 2, and it's kind of hard for me to have coherent thoughts at the moment. I think I'm playing Destiny more than I have in any other game in the last 10 years as far as the number of hours I'm putting in.
Wow. Okay.
Because there's something about the format of Destiny where it's not very intense to play. You can spend a lot of hours just ticking off boxes and doing little quests and getting your engrams and stuff. And I don't find it very tiring to play. So it's not mentally taxing. I find. So I can put in a lot long hours and it's just a treadmill of things to tick off, and it's having a kind of addictive effect on me. I think where I'm just playing it lots and lots.
You need intervention.
Yeah,
We're probably not best equipped to do that for you.
no,
I am.
I'm certainly not fucking equipped for that. I have what you might call a conflict of interest.
Yeah, it's true. You want him playing. Like, hey, look, there's always somebody I can guarantee that's going to be able to run raids with me.
I want to feed him the Destiny heroin like as covertly as possible, so that I'm not being too obvious about it. But no, look, honestly, all jokes aside, I'm actually really enjoying the fact that we're playing stuff together at the moment, and that you're enjoying it.
Oh, yeah.
Like you are. It's been good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I am enjoying it a lot. I don't think that, to me, it's not like an amazing game to play still. Like I don't find it really, really fun to play. I'm enjoying it a lot. It is somewhat fun to play, but it doesn't tickle a part of my brain that gets me like amped to play. So it's a weird mix for me of being very addicting and easy to play, easy to get into now. Like, now that I've kind of up to my waist in it, I'm comfortable enough that I can just keep going. But it's not like awesome fun for me. It's not like me playing Sekiro or something like that, or even like the actual moment-to-moment gameplay. I still prefer Warframe. I like the speed and the flipping around and the more dynamic nature of Warframe's combat. But under Destiny is undeniably fun to play, and there's a lot to do, but it's interesting.
Yep. I think it is like when I got back into it, like I had my big hiatus. I skipped out on the 2 expansions, and then I came back afterwards. It was like I forget which season of the Drifter. I came back during Season of the Drifter. And when I came back during Season of the Drifter, I smashed Destiny so hard. Like I played it just absolutely constantly. And it was because like I had so much shit to get through. I had so much content to go do and experience that not doing it felt like I was wasting time playing Destiny, right? Like just doing the same shit to get engrams. Like I had a bunch of shit to do. It kind of sounds like you're going through the same thing.
I am. Yeah, I think.
Yeah. I'm here to tell you there is light at the end of the tunnel. You will come to a point where you're like, hey, I don't need to play this all the time, but it's nice to come back to every now and then.
As long as I get to that point by November now, at least I have to.
Yeah. So Matt, are you saying that Christian's going to get to a point that's beyond the light?
Because seriously, even though like I'm so glad they've delayed Beyond Light now to November.
Oh yeah, same.
Because if it was still September, for me, just starting playing like last month or this month, actually, I think I'm not kind of keep track of time. That is terrifying if it was rotating in September. I am finding that is still weighing over my head like a sword of Damocles. I was messaging during the week about how it is a bit stressful for me sometimes managing all of the quests and everything to do. And today being the first day in the weekly reset, I find that that's the most stressful time for me, is when I've got the most things to do. Everything's reset, and I'm like, shit, I've got to get all my weekly bounties. I've got to do all get all these engrams from all these different activities and blah 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 blah. And in the back of my mind, I'm like, I'm also thinking about like long term, if I want to accomplish something like the Wayfarer seal before a rotation, then I need to make sure I'm doing 5 heroic strikes on each flashpoint, and I need to make sure I'm getting all of the ascendant chests in every version of Dreaming City, and like there's all these time gated things that I'm aware, even if it's not important for me to get, I'm aware that that's still on a time limit, and that if I want to get around to that stuff before the rotation, it may take 7-8 weeks. Like the guides I've read online say like how to get Wayfarer in like 7 weeks.
Yeah.
But that's it's saying like even 7 weeks, that's not like a whole lot of breathing room, even still.
Yeah. Wayfarer is a hard one because of the fact that it's probably the most time gated one, actually.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah.
Really?
That and the Dreaming City one as well, Rivenspone. That one's pretty time gated too. Yeah.
So I looked at all of the seals, and I picked that one as the one that seemed the most attainable to me. I don't know why.
It is absolutely attainable. It's not hard to get. It's just.
Yeah, I actually think that the two most attainable ones at the moment, probably the Moments of Triumph one and the current season, they're really not that tough at all.
The main reason I say it's really time gated is because the Osiris stuff. Wayfarer requires you to do this. Like, the Osiris weapons are a pain. They're a massive fucking grind.
Fortunately, when I did play last time, during Curse of Osiris, I got, I think, 6 of the 10 prophecies done then.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I do have a head start. But I think some of the other, any of the seals that involve doing Crucible or raids, I just count those out straight away.
100%. Yeah.
Despite the fact that you got a raid in last week and that you're probably going to get another one in tomorrow night.
But doing one raid is not like some of those challenges or whatever where it's like get every raid weapon, every raid armor.
Those are insane.
Yeah, do it. Yeah, that's crazy.
Yeah,
that's when you're basically like you're in a Destiny clan that just raids.
Yeah.
Like they're a raid clan. You know, they aim for world firsts. Like that's when that becomes achievable for you.
So on a slightly unrelated but related note, guys, do you remember how I made the pledge to achieve 6 seals this season? I've decided that I'm going to commit to you here and now. I'm going to up that number. I'm pledging.
Oh God!
I'm pledging to 9.
9.
9. Yeah.
Knowing what's involved now, I'm surprised you don't have them all. To be quite honest, like
yeah.
Knowing how much you play, how dedicated you are to getting these seals. How you say if you're doing 9, how many are there?
I think that misses like maybe 3 or 4.
Surely you can just get the other 3 or 4.
There's 2 of them that are very PvP centric, which I'm not.
Osiris.
Yeah.
The Osiris one is just like, hell no.
Yeah. So I'm not as interested in those, and I think that if I was going to sort of go after the PvP related ones, I want to dedicate an entire season to it because they're kind of related activities. Most of the rest of the stuff is kind of environmental and raid related and that sort of stuff. But it's not that they're without some pretty challenging steps. Like there's 3 of those 9 are going to require me to do flawless completions of raids, and that terrifies me. But I'm feeling a lot more confident now. I think I can. I know I can do 2 of them at very least. Third one's going to be tough, but we'll see. Yeah.
That's crazy. So flawless means that you no deaths for you, right?
The entire team.
The entire team.
Yeah.
No deaths for the entire team.
Correct.
Yes.
Yeah. In fact, there's even a couple of them that you can trigger the flawless run when you start the raid, and if anyone dies, it boots you to orbit. So.
Yep.
Yeah.
Holy shit! That's insane.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's why I say raid guild. Like if you're in a raid clan, that's when that becomes achievable. I have I don't. That's one that I'm actually feeling fairly certain Luke's not going to get.
Yeah.
And that's exactly why I'm pledging for it, because I know that if I commit, I'm going to really go hammer and tongs for it. So
if you had a single flawless run thus far, I'd be like, okay, maybe there's a chance. But what raids is it? What does it want flawless?
The first one I'm going to attempt is Scourge of the Past. Because the flawless run on that raid is the only thing I'm missing from that seal. So
right, yeah, okay. Yeah. Scourge of the Past is actually one of the easiest raids, so that's mega achievable.
Yeah, I think so too. So, and Christian, it's not that you're without tricks for some of these as well. Like Scourge of the Past is an example. As a raid, there's different sort of steps throughout it, and the second encounter is actually like a sparrow race encounter, and it's really easy to die during. But you actually only need 2 people to make it to the end. So what you can do without actually sort of nullifying your flawless attempt is you can have 4 of the team actually go to orbit and let the 2 people who are the most confident sparrow riders actually complete that, and then you join back in afterwards. So there are a few ways around it. Yeah.
Okay.
Nothing like, game breaking in terms of using third-party tools or anything to sort of break the system like, some people out there will do. I'm not doing any of that. It's more just clever ways of kind of setting up the strong players to do the bits that are really risky. And trying to avoid the things that are likely to scrub the whole team. So, yeah.
The sparrow race there is also like it is the easiest place to die in, absolutely, but it's also really early in the raid.
Yeah.
So like,
so if you screw it up, you
fine.
can restart. Yeah.
Yeah, just restart. It's fine. You know, we have to redo one fight.
Yeah,
whatever.
100%. And I have completed it like a number of times without issue, but I just know that in terms of wasting people's time, like that's the one point of failure that's probably going to be more than anything else, the frustrating one. So yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah. So it's interesting, but yeah.
I'm sorry, I don't have anything more to talk about other than Destiny.
I wanted to just very quickly, because we were all involved, talk about our raid experience last week and how much fun that was. So. Because we all together, Adrian included, and a couple of our sort of local friends and clan members, Paddy and Chris, jumped in and did the Garden of Salvation raid, which we streamed across 2 different nights. And I would put down sort of like the triumphant kind of feeling at the very end of that we all shared together as one of my gaming highlights of recent years. That was awesome.
Yeah. It was so good.
Yeah.
It was also hilarious, just like sitting there and being responsible for building, and then every single time Luke started running towards a portal, just puckering my ass.
I did it once.
Twice in one run.
I fucked up one. Okay, I fucked up one run. That's all.
we all fucked up at different points.
That's right. Yeah, that was a significant one, but yeah.
The thing about it was that like the end by the end of that run, like everything that could have gone wrong had gone wrong, and we just somehow found a way to scrape through.
I don't have any footage to show people, but I just to paint a brief picture for everybody. Like one of the things that happens during this final encounter of the Garden of Salvation raid is basically the floor starts disappearing away from you if you don't rebuild it, which requires some coordination and dancing around to sort of activate nodes during this scenario, which requires a lot of teamwork. And we were running such a trash fire attempt that we had no floor left. Basically, we were hot potatoing across like floor as lava. Like could have spelled doom for us at any moment, and somehow we managed to pull it out and not fall in the goop. So, yeah.
It was amazing. Like basically for half the run, we just gave up on rebuilding the floor. I was like, nope, fuck it.
Yeah.
Do it live.
Yeah. we can't work effectively as a team, so just be awesome individually. That was good.
No, I totally enjoyed it. It was really good. Quite a lot of fun.
Yeah.
I'm looking forward to doing another raid where I don't have mic issues though, because that was really frustrating.
Yeah.
Oh god, yeah. The mic issues were bad.
Yeah. Technology this week's been terrible. Yeah. So Matt, what have you been doing game wise?
Well, in terms of, I'll go from one first-person shooter to another. I replayed the entirety of Halo Reach, start to finish. I downloaded the Master Chief Collection because Halo 3 just came out on it on PC. And so I'm like, oh, cool. Like, I'll re-download the Master Chief Collection and then play Halo 3. But because there's so many games in it now, I hadn't realized. So, like, you download the Master Chief Collection, but it doesn't download all the games. Like, it kind of downloads like this empty husk that you have to download the games into.
Right.
And you go into, like, when you first launch the game, it's like, which content do you want? And it's like, oh shit, okay, well I've got Halo Reach in there, but I don't have Halo 1, 2, or 3 installed. And you can install them separately from the multiplayer content. So I've only installed the single player stuff, or the campaign related stuff. And so I was like, okay, screw it. Like I'll tick those off to start downloading, and I'll start playing Reach. And I had intended on just like, I'll just dabble with Reach for a little bit, and then pop into Halo 3. And that's not how it went. I actually just played through Reach and finished it. Like I started playing the campaign again. I'm like, oh god, this campaign's so good. And yeah, like I was talking on Twitter a little bit about the fact that the Halo Reach AI is vastly more interesting to me than the AI in Destiny. For the fact that the characters in Reach that you fight have they don't want to die, right? Like, so you fight an elite, like the big tall aliens that are freaking scary and everything. But the moment their shields pop, like they fucking run. Like they're not like, no, fuck you, I'm not dying. And they'll go recharge their shields before jumping back into the fray. Whereas in Destiny, everything's kind of just a moving target. Like it doesn't have stuff like that it does. somebody actually pointed out there was a GDC talk they gave where they were talking about how they made the AI in Destiny more complex over what they had done in Halo Reach. And it's really interesting because like they are absolutely more complicated, but the decisions they're making aren't quite as interesting. Like it's basically like, am I going to use this attack or this attack versus like, am I attacking at all or just pissing off and running because I'm terrified? Particularly like grunts in Halo have this really fun thing where if you take out an elite, the elites are kind of like their leadership. And so if you take out their leadership, the grunts are like, they just turn into cowards or they turn into suicidal maniacs. They pull grenades and rush at you. And so like there's really fun, interesting behaviors in there that you kind of have to learn to work around. And yeah, like it was really refreshing just to kind of go back into that and play it start to finish. I'm a little bit disappointed that all the armor I unlocked in the Xbox version doesn't carry over to the PC version, so you have to kind of re-earn everything. Which is a little disappointing. But I'm also like, okay, well, cool. Now I want to get all my Halo Reach armor because it's my favorite Halo armor in the game.
Just thinking back, the Xbox version doesn't actually require you to sign into Xbox Live, does it? Or anything like that?
It remembers. Like, it does actually require you to sign into Xbox Live.
Okay.
And all of your stuff was stored with Bungie, which has been transferred to 343 now.
Oh, okay.
So everything that you got in the Xbox 360 version, you still have, even though it's running on the Xbox One, which is really neat. But if you've got Master Chief Collection, you've got Reach in the Master Chief Collection, it's a different thing now. It's a different progression. So yeah, so I played through Reach. I started Halo 1, which is the remastered version. And I keep flopping back and forth between the old graphics and the new, trying to decide if I actually prefer the nostalgia of the old or the pretty graphics of the new. But yeah, so I'm playing through the Halo stuff at the moment. I'm kind of chipping away at it slowly because, you know, I know what to expect. It's just like fun to play with and have some nostalgic moments about. But other than that and Destiny 2, I actually boosted up.
Just before you go off Halo, I have one question for you, just while you're on the Halo brain. So as you know, Halo Reach is the only Halo that I've played so far, and I haven't actually completed it. I'm sort of maybe a third of the way through. I fell off it, got distracted by other stuff. I want to get back to it at some point. Should I go back and play the Halo Reach on my 360, or should I buy Master Chief Collection and play that version?
Buy Master Chief Collection.
Okay.
On PC, it looks gorgeous. Like it is. They've made some visual improvements. They haven't actually gone. They've not done the full remake thing that they've done with Halo 1 or Halo 2. They've just remastered the graphics and done stuff where it's like old, really fuzzy textures have been replaced with their 4K versions.
Right.
Like the original 4K versions of the texture, and they're gorgeous. Like the game is just.
And I assume it's keyboard mouse as well.
Yeah, you can do keyboard and mouse.
Yeah.
I started playing with keyboard and mouse and then actually went to the controller.
Yeah, you'd have the nostalgia issue with that. I wouldn't. So, yeah.
I think that it'd be interesting to see how you went going from keyboard and mouse to controller, because I find controller vastly more satisfying with Reach. But again, like you say, that could be nostalgia. So I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I know what shooters on controller feel like to me, and I can handle them fine, because I played Destiny 2 when it launched on PlayStation, for example, you know, for quite a while. But I just just enjoy it better on mouse and keyboard. Yeah. Yeah,
that's totally fair. Yeah. I would definitely say, like, you know, absolutely get back into it. If you're ever interested in playing co-op, I think I said to you before, like, if you ever want to play co-op, 100%, I'll totally jump in and play with you, because I love the Halo campaign.
Sounds so like good. A future stream. Yeah.
Especially once we get to like Halo 3, there's some incredibly big battles there that are just so much fun to play co-op. And one day we'll get ODST. And that's like number one Halo game for me. So
yeah.
Yeah, so not Halo stuff. I had played the demo for Dragon Quest Builders 2, and I really enjoyed it. And so recently, it went on sale with the Steam Summer Sale, so I bought it. And it's been sitting in my library for a couple of weeks. I booted it up. I've actually been playing a ton of it. I think I've put in like 12 hours or something like that so far. 13 hours, yeah. And yeah, it's tons of fun. Like, it's really interesting because it's basically Minecraft. But there's this really neat, quite amusing town building mechanic to it, where you're basically trying to build up towns or a town. At least that's where I'm at right now. And draw people into it to kind of achieve these goals while exploring this world and gathering materials and yeah, it's a lot of fun in comparison to like Minecraft, where there's not a lot of obviously you've got villages that you can kind of interact with, but here the focus is really on like creating a town that people live in, that they create and organize a farm in. And yeah, you can run around and fight stuff, but that's not really the focus of it. It really is all about like building up these towns. And I quite like it. It kind of scratches this itch for town building stuff that I've had since like Fallout 4. Because I thoroughly enjoyed like the town building stuff, and that was probably the thing that I enjoyed most about Fallout 4.
Oh my god. It's so different to my experience. Like, I hate town building. And that's the worst thing about Fallout 4.
Here though, like this is vastly better. Like
I have heard good things about Dragon Quest builders. Yeah.
It's just amusing as well. Like the writing for the game is fucking like I don't know if it's translation and they've just like taken the original writing and gone, the translators have gone like, okay, well they're writing it in this voice, so we're just going to ramp that up to 11. And so there's like this one character you meet that's this warrior woman, and then she speaks to you and she's got a fucking Valley Girl thing going on. And it's hardcore Valley Girl, like it's just constant like you know, and like, exactly sure. Right. She asks for a bathhouse. She asks you to make a bathhouse at one point. And some of the fucking words that she uses, I'm like, oh god, I hate this character so much. but I love to hate her. Like it's just the writing is so good that it's bad. But yeah, like I quite enjoyed that. It's this really fun story as well, where like builders have essentially the entire population is brainwashed into thinking builders, which you're this apprentice builder, bring only bad omens basically, and everybody should hate them, and everybody should like go out and destroy stuff because that's the way to go. And just kind of by virtue of the fact that you start building things around people, like they start going, okay, that's interesting. Cool. I'm going to allow this. And then like one of the very first things you do is like a priest comes along and he says, okay, well, I'm going to let you build this stuff so I can destroy it. Like that's the only reason I'm allowing this to happen.
This is hilarious. This is actually almost like the entire plot for one of the story arcs for Minecraft story mode. Like seriously.
Oh, really?
Yeah. They go to this place where building is actually forbidden. Yeah.
Yeah. So it sounds incredibly familiar. But yeah, it's like this priest comes into town. He's like, yeah, I'm going to let you build stuff so I can destroy this really important artifact. And then you build it, and he becomes a convert. He basically becomes like, okay, so look, I love destroying stuff, but I also actually like read a whole bunch about farming, and kind of like starts mentoring people in the town to farm better. And it's really cute. It's massively cute and just incredibly fun to play. And yeah, it's Minecraft with a narrative kind of going on with it essentially.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've been really, really enjoying it. It's just a super chill game to sit down with and just build houses. So
looks like a perfect Switch game to me. Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, 100%.
Yeah. Nice. So me this week's been mostly Destiny, obviously, because I've got some shit to do on that. I've still been sticking a bunch of time into Persona 4 Golden, which I'm sort of steadily making my way through. But I wanted to chat about another game that I actually fired up a couple of weeks ago, sort of prior to our last show, and I've continued this fortnight sort of going through. It's a very short game, but I'm kind of taking my time with it because I'm just playing little bits at a time as I am sort of going through the other stuff. And that's actually Alan Wake. So,
fuck yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I committed to doing it after obviously getting so sucked into Control. And absolutely loving, Remedy's sort of take on the paranormal sort of stuff in that game, and then later on learning that there's these tie-ins to Alan Wake and kind of wanting to know what came before it. I've always been intending to actually sort of play it, and I actually acquired it a while back because I don't know if you guys remember that Alan Wake was actually taken off sale a couple of years ago because they lost the rights to some of the music or something like that. Yeah. But thankfully we actually got got given some warning before that happened, and I jumped on and acquired it on Steam before it got pulled. And I've had it sitting in my my list ever since. And then, recently remembered it was there and thought, well, shit, I should probably pull it out and actually play it, given that I've played Control now. And I know that the next DLC for Control after Foundation is actually going to be a lot more Alan Wake centric. So I kind of wanted to understand, what essentially was going on there before, playing that DLC. So I guess time-wise, knowing how long the game is, I'm probably about halfway through now, I think. And I'm really enjoying it. It's definitely, you can see that it's, showing its age a little bit compared to their more recent stuff, obviously. The whole mechanic with, taking out the ghosts or the sort of malicious entities around you by shining the flashlight on them first, and then, that kind of weakens them to be able to shoot them, I think is actually quite cool. And it adds that extra layer of sort of real kind of horror to it, where you actually need to confront the things that you can't see in the dark with the light before you can actually engage them. I think that's a really clever mechanic, sort of psychologically, as well as, with the way the weapons work. I dig that a lot. I think it's really cool. And yeah, story so far is interesting. I get the feeling that, because as Alan Wake, you're very much sort of thrust into the story and the action, what feels to me almost like a little bit prematurely. Like I would almost have benefited from understanding a little bit more about who this guy is, who this author is before the story began. Because I feel like the very first half an hour of the game, it left me kind of thinking, have I missed a beat here? Like, am I supposed to know more about this sort of, primary antagonist? Or protagonist, I should say. But once things got going, obviously that abated a little bit, and sort of, you get stuck into the story and, the weird ride that it's taking you on. But I'm digging it. I'm really enjoying it so far. It's a cool game.
I hate horror games, but I fucking love Alan Wake. Like, it is so good. It's just such a cool balance. It kind of reminds me, it's got the same vibe as Unsolved Mysteries, like if you remember that old TV show.
Yeah.
Just added that to Netflix.
Yeah, it had the new season on Netflix, which I may have watched and got really upset that it's so bad. But it kind of has like this it's creepy because it feels like there's a mystery going on. Like, there's a mystery kind of going on to solve. I love that. I love that about it. And it's not overly scary either. Like, it's not jump scare scary. So yeah, I'm really glad you're playing it.
Yeah.
And so, Luke, does this mean that you've stopped playing Persona 4?
No, I just said a moment ago I'm still working my way through it. So
sorry, I missed that.
Yeah. No, I'm still going on. I think probably this week I have sunk about another 8 hours into it. So yeah, it's still putting a decent amount of time in. I'm kind of doing what I did with Persona 5 early on, where I sort of took a break after sort of major dungeons finished and then came back to it. And in the case of 5, I actually enjoyed it a lot more as a result. And 4, I'm up to a point now where there's been a big shift in the story, and I think it's actually like a natural sort of pause point where I won't feel like I'm missing too much by coming back to it. Yeah, so all I'll say about where I'm up to in 4 is that you kind of get a massive lead on who might be responsible for some of the stuff that's going on. And the next step revolves around that, and that's kind of where I'm at the moment. So,
okay, I'll speak very vaguely. Has there been any sort of hospital scene yet?
There has been hospital scenes related to one of the side
stories.
Yeah.
Okay, all right,
but not related to the main story.
Okay, I think I know where you're at then.
Yeah,
interesting.
Yeah. Cool.
There's still a long ways to go.
Yeah, I'm sure there is. Yeah, I'm sure there is.
Yeah.
And I'm pretty sure enjoying it. Yeah.
I'm pretty sure I'm actually fairly close to where Luke's at. You've probably saved the person that I'm currently on track to save. So, I haven't stopped playing it either. It's basically just like I've put it down for a little bit because the last 2 times I've booted it up, I'm like, oh, where am I at? And I was like, I'm in a dungeon. Nope, shut it down. I'll come back to this later when I'm more in the headspace for it. But yeah, like I'm still thoroughly enjoying it, and I 100% intend to finish it because the story's really fucking good. So
yeah, it is. It's absolutely the primary driver for the game. There's no doubt.
Oh yeah,
it's cool. But yeah, that's pretty much what I've been playing this week, and could probably add Necrobriss to the list for next week. So, but more on that later.
Yeah.
All right.
We've got like 30 minutes, 25 minutes, and it'll be released.
No, it's out already. I'm sure.
No. I looked too. It's
12.
Was it? God damn it! I thought it was at 8 p.m. our time.
12 Eastern. So I think it's another 25 minutes before it releases.
Twitter lied to me. Anyway, cool. we'll mention it then. All right. Well, anyway, that's kind of kicking us neatly into chatting about some industry news. So now, given that it's the most recent thing that's happened, Christian, do you want to lead us off tonight? Yeah,
I will. It also follows naturally from Persona talk too, because Nintendo had their first Direct in a long time recently, which was, they did say ahead of time that it's a mini Direct and a partner showcase. So very much setting people's expectations that this isn't going to be Breath of the Wild 2 footage. This isn't going to be Metroid Prime 4 footage. This is a mini Direct about partner games. Yeah. And it was very mini. It was only an 8-minute Direct, and it really, just quick updates on a couple of existing games, like some DLC for Cadence of Hyrule, and showing that like a WWE game's coming to Switch and that sort of thing.
I was surprised they announced 3 different DLCs for Cadence. That's weird. Yeah, all at the same time. Yeah, that was a bit strange, because it's like, if they're all, are they releasing at different times? They are.
I think they're
releasing at different times. The third one, which is actually the story content, based around the Majora's Mask kind of link, is not until later. So yeah, the other 2 might be simultaneous. Yeah.
The article I'm reading says physical copy of Cadence of Hyrule, along with all 3 of its new DLC packs, will be available this October 23rd.
I think the prior 2 DLC packs are actually coming out before that.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
But the stuff that was more interesting for me, and the stuff which triggered a lot of traditional Nintendo fans, because they were foolishly expecting stuff that was never going to happen, was a couple of Shin Megame Tensei related announcements. So the first was Shin Megame Tensei 3 Nocturne HD remaster. So this was a Shin Megame Tensei 3, I think it was a PSP game or a PS2 game.
PS2, I think.
PS2, yeah. And that's going to be really cool. And then Shin Megame Tensei 5 is a game that was originally announced, I think, alongside the announcement of the Switch. It was in Nintendo's first big showcase of games that are going to happen on the Switch, and all it was like a logo and some dialogue at the time. And it was either just when the Switch announced, or like within a couple of months of the Switch being released. So it's been a long wait to hear anything about SMT5, and it's cool that it's finally got a proper trailer, and it's coming out 2021, so next year. And yeah, I'm super excited for that. I think a lot of people may not know, because the mainline SMT series hasn't hit the mainstream popularity of Persona yet, because they are the same series. So the original Persona, which was called Revelations Persona, was a spin-off of SMT. So I think I might have talked about this on another episode, actually.
Yeah,
but
remind us again, for my sake as well as everybody else who might be listening, because I frequently forget the relationship between the 2.
I'll start from the start, because I think it's quite interesting. So it's just in the 80s, in the 1980s, there was a Japanese novel series called Digital Devil Story, and that novel series is the inspiration and the setting for what became the Shin Megame Tensei series, and SMT has always been darker and more mature, and it's about literal digital demons. So like a computer virus exists, which is hell, and hell as a computer virus takes over the world, and they're usually, I think they're all set in like a post-apocalyptic Tokyo where digital demons and devils have taken over the world. And unlike Persona, which tends to focus on social relationships, SMT is always about good and evil and law and order. So it's about like chaos and control. So they're not big on like the characters aren't as important. The social side of stuff isn't really there. It's more about a more traditional good versus evil. But they do spin it so that, as a lot of Japanese games tend to do, good it tends to represent like obedience and control and submission. Like that's order. It's like order versus chaos, but chaos is also freedom.
Yeah.
So it's not good versus bad.
There has to be an appeal to actually create like a question.
Yeah. So there was a game called what was it called? Shin Megame Tensei If. They made a game called Shin Megame Tensei If that was a SMT game set in a high school, and that became really popular. And then as a spin-off, they made that into its own series called Persona. So and then they took away the post-apocalyptic stuff, but all of the personas that you fight, all of the like baddies you fight are the same creatures and the same baddies as in the mainline SMT series.
So if I play an SMT game, I'm likely to see a penis chariot. That's what you're saying to me?
Yes, yeah, for sure.
Cool.
And that's why like sometimes the art direction in Persona is a bit jarring, where you have like weird penis chariots and stuff like that, and it's because a lot of that artwork comes from a more serious and mature like setting of the mainline SMT series. I've only played SMT 4, which was a 3DS game, but like the gameplay is very similar to the combat is very similar to Persona, except there's none of that social stuff. But I reckon when SMT 5 comes out, you should give it a shot, Luke.
Yeah, I will definitely. I mean, now that Persona in general's got its hooks into me, I'm not going to pass that one by for sure.
Yeah. Just imagine like Persona with more Doom in it.
Yeah. I mean, the more combat thing doesn't appeal to me so much as the tone and setting does.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
But SMT does have a lot more going on with the demon negotiations. Like, I can't remember in Persona 5, do you do any demon negotiations? Is that a thing at all? Yeah,
it gets more technical in Royal as well.
Okay, yeah. But that's like, from what I remember, that's built up more in the main SMT series.
Yeah.
That's a bigger part of it.
So Matt, to sort of paint a picture for you, like one of the big differences between the two in terms of the combat is in Persona 4, like when you take a persona, it's usually just from beating it, there's like a random chance that you'll get to take a persona sort of as a result of the combat, and it's not necessarily the one that you fought. In Persona 5, you generally only take the personas that you fight, but the way you do it is you actually have to beat them into submission and not kill them, usually, and actually negotiate with them to get them to come to you. And the way you negotiate with them also comes down to what kind of personality characteristics they've got in terms of what dialogue choices you engage in with them. And there's a lot of sort of, you've got to make calls on the fly and kind of understand a little bit about their motivations and their personality type to be successful. It's very cool. So
that sounds really cool. Yeah, I like that.
That's not Royal exclusive. That was in the original P5.
I think the thing that's Royal exclusive is you get a little bit of more information to work off when you're doing it. Yeah,
that makes sense because when I was doing it in P5, I would usually have like a wiki open of like all their personality types, because it was impossible to tell.
In Royal, there's dialogue from your supporting characters that actually say, you know, this one looks like it's in suffering. Why not try this sort of thing? Occasionally they'll throw hints at you. So yeah,
gotcha.
Yeah.
That was really it for the Nintendo stuff. Was SMT 3 remaster, SMT 5, and then a couple of other smaller things. I wanted to say, in the Japanese version of the Direct, they announced Final Fantasy Crystal Chronicles remaster. Presumably not in the Western Direct because no plans maybe to bring it out this way yet. But that would be cool if they did eventually get around to that.
Yeah. Nice. I did see that as part of the SMT 5 announcement as well, that Atlas was saying that it was going to be a worldwide simultaneous release, which seems like the first time they've done that, isn't it?
Yeah, that's like super rare for Atlas. Like the Persona games are normally like a full year between regions. So that's cool.
I'm really hoping that Japanese studios, like premier Japanese studios in general, and Sega especially, I really want to start doing this, particularly with Yakuza games, will start doing simultaneous worldwide releases now that they know that titles like that actually have a Western appeal as well.
Definitely.
Yeah, they should do that a lot more.
Yeah, I think it shows that they're probably hoping that SMT will latch on more in the West now that Persona has. They're kind of hoping that it'll be like a one-two punch.
I'd love to talk to somebody in detail about the decisions behind that kind of thing. So I'm sure that part of it is kind of marketing and deciding whether there's going to be significant appeal or not. In terms of releasing it in the Eastern markets first to sort of see how it goes, and then if it goes well, they invest the dollars in sort of bringing it to the other market. But some of it's got to be development logistical as well around the translations and the voice acting sort of needing to be recorded for English audiences and that sort of stuff. There's a whole bunch more effort that's got to go into that, obviously.
Sure, because most of the original SMT games never got released in the West. I think SMT 3 was the first one to get released in the West, and there were a couple of other spin-offs that never came this way too. So yeah, at least they are coming this way now. So
yeah. Nice. Well, in terms of sort of showcases of upcoming games and that sort of thing, we also had the Ubisoft Forward kind of direct style presentation. This is sort of in place of what they would have typically done at E3. And there was a bit of stuff that they went through. I'm not going to go through all of the titles sort of talked about or presented. The highlights in particular was we actually saw some gameplay of Assassin's Creed Valhalla, which I don't know about you guys. I'm actually a lot less sold on the game after seeing the gameplay compared to what they showed prior to that.
Yep.
Yeah.
It just didn't move the needle for me at all. Actually, like I'm already pretty much at 0 for that game.
Yeah.
Yeah. Pretty much.
It looks clunky to me in a way that I've seen in previous Assassin's Creed games look clunky, and maybe not as much the last two, which looked a bit more polished. Yeah.
Maybe it was all of like the YouTube compression or whatever, but I've heard people saying hands-on the game seemed gorgeous, but it looked ugly to me personally. Like, I don't like they've gone for this really green tinged color grading that looks kind of grimy and ugly to me, and I don't know. Doesn't appeal.
It's weird. And speaking of weird, we saw a whole lot more for Watch Dogs Legion as well. That's a game as well that I'm just looking at what they showed and going, I don't know about this one. Like, I'm
excited for design reasons, mostly because like if they do it right, that's fucking cool. Like that's really interesting.
Yeah.
Do I expect them to do it right? No. I don't. Yeah. I really don't. I think it's going to be a mess.
It seems like the big hook that everything is sort of hinging on with that one is the ability to actually recruit almost anybody in the game to your side and players. Like literally this huge kind of plethora of NPCs. The amount of programmable characters that they've actually put that work into just seems ridiculous. But to me as a player, I get the feeling that that's going to have initial novelty that will wear off very quickly, and then you'll sort of be left with the rest of the game still has to be good. So
totally,
yeah.
Totally. But I really don't like the kind of tone and aesthetic of that game. It's got this kind of like it's not cyberpunk. It's like this Fortnite watered down cyberpunk.
Yeah,
they're going for. Where
I liked Watch Dogs 2 because of the fact that like it kind of took the situation seriously as well. Whereas I feel like Legion is a joke. Like it's kind of like rather than like here's a serious narrative about cybersecurity in the United Kingdom. It's basically like lol, funny grandma shoot bad guys. Like it doesn't. I entirely agree. Like the only thing about the game that has me even slightly interested is that underlying mechanic of being able to recruit anyone, and the fact they've made claims that there will be narrative specific to those characters and such, which is immensely interesting to me mechanically. But outside of that stuff, like unless the marketing is like really misleading, which has been happening a lot recently, where games are being marketed actually quite badly. And with everything else we've been hearing about Ubisoft, like nothing would fucking surprise me. So
yeah, absolutely. The other thing that I thought looking at it is that from Watch Dogs 1 to 2 to Legion, the kind of devolving of the slightly serious nature that one had to what you guys were just describing as that weird kind of crazy cyberpunky wackiness. It actually reminds me a lot in a bad way of what happened progressively with Saints Row.
That's exactly what I was going to say.
Yeah.
But Saints Row, the first one even was still a little bit silly. It just got more silly over time.
So was the first Watch Dogs.
A lot more
yeah.
Like when they hit Saints Row 3, I thought that was as silly as that series was going to get. Like hitting people with dildo bats and stuff. And then they went to like dubstep guns and superpowers, and then they went to hell. And I'm like, what is this series now?
The hell thing was dumb. Like they kind of jumped the shark. Absolutely. but this it feels like Saints Row kind of ramped up over time, whereas this is like Watch Dogs 2 was as serious as Watch Dogs 1, whereas this is just suddenly.
Because like I get maybe it was I didn't play it, but like the sort of hipstery like what were they called, something sec, dead sec, like the whole dead sec hackers thing.
Yeah,
that came across a little goofy to me.
Dead sec was in the first one as well. It was a different kind of setup though.
There's no
They're like the young cool hacker collective.
Yeah,
you know,
it was like the movie Hackers, like literally like that. It
is literally though that like. That shit exists in San Francisco, like that is the setting, right? Like it has this really big like tech atmosphere and tech group, and it is very much based on Anon, like Anonymous basically. Obviously, it's not realistic. Like it's taking that concept and it's being like, okay, well let's make it action packed. Whereas here, like nothing about a grandmother hacking and going attacking government agents is fucking realistic at all.
Yeah.
Right. Like DedSec, I can go and say, okay, like what they're doing makes sense, right? Like they're going in hacking government and they're avoiding government agents and the cops are after them and everything like this. Whereas this one does really feel like, but they've just kind of tossed out any kind of idea of taking that narrative a little bit more seriously, or having any sort of meaning behind it. Like there was tons of meaning behind like all of the struggles you went through as a character in Watch Dogs 2. Like you're playing a black man in San Francisco, tech community and everything like that. There's a ton of shit it touched on. That was really good. DedSec was probably the silliest thing about it in the grand scheme of things.
Yeah.
But this feels like going from Saints Row 1 to Saints Row 4. Like that's what this feels like. So
yeah,
I think with Watch Dogs, I was just hoping like remember the very first reveal trailer for Watch Dogs and how it was one of Ubi's like bull shots where it never looked as good as it did. But the sort of tone that first trailer set, I was hoping the series would be more like Deus Ex.
Yeah, 100%.
It never ended up like
Watch Dogs' biggest failing, like within the first one release, is the fact that it released so soon after Grand Theft Auto 5. That's the thing that sunk it, ultimately. Yeah. It was too much of the same in terms of elements of that game that when you compare the two together, it was clear that one was vastly better than the other, and that kind of really screwed it over. So, yeah.
I 100% recommend though, like if you get the time, go play Watch Dogs 2. It is a fucking brilliant game. It's very, very much worth playing.
It sounds like a game that probably would have been given to me for free at some point by something. Probably got to
If you watched the Ubisoft Forward conference and actually went to the Uplay sort of service, you actually would have gotten it free. They would.
That was it. Yeah, I did see something about getting it for free. Yeah.
I don't know if that window's still open. I suspect not at this point, but yeah. And then they showed a trailer for Far Cry 6, which was probably supposed to be their one more thing, despite the fact that it leaked early a few days beforehand. And of course we've got Giancarlo Esposito, who's been showing up in a lot of fucking places lately. People know him.
The exact same guy.
Yeah, as the bad guy, essentially. So, you'll know him from Breaking Bad, Better Call Saul, The Mandalorian. Now he's in The Boys as well. Like, he's in all of the popular shit. So, yeah. It's interesting, and he does seem to be playing pretty much the same character again. Yeah. So, yeah,
I think it's just one of those cases of them calling him up and being like, that character you do, we want that guy. Come do the same thing for us.
I saw an interview with him recently where he was saying that he's really keen to get in on one of the Marvel movies, and I'm just like, please don't, because it'll just be the same character again. Like,
I did see something with him saying that he actually doesn't like playing bad guys very much. And he would like to have more opportunities to play good guys. This obviously is not one of those cases.
Yeah. He needs to break free of that typecasting soon. I think otherwise his career is probably going to be just that forever. So
yeah.
So I don't know. We haven't seen anything much more about that apart from the fact that it's coming at some point. So
it's just another fucking Far Cry. Like I just can't give a shit about them anymore.
Yeah, I really can't. The direction of that franchise seems to be look at our wacky villain. And that's just never been enough to sustain my interest or make a good game. Like, I enjoyed Far Cry 3, and like Vast was a cool villain, but spoiler alert, he dies halfway through the story, and then there's another villain which is boring. And then 4 and 5, it was just like, other crazy villains, but nothing else going on in the game to make it interesting.
Yeah.
The last one was basically like, hey, so it's Far Cry, but now it's also Fallout with a bit of Borderlands mixed in, and it's like, fuck off.
Yeah.
Like, it's just fucking Far Cry with a different coat of paint. I just cannot give a shit.
Literally a pink coat of paint in that case.
Yeah.
But what was that one called? That was like the spin-off of 5.
I care so little, I don't know.
I think it's telling that we can't actually remember.
Because they had Blood Dragon, which was the spin-off of 3 that was actually decent.
Blood Dragon is the best of the Far Cry series because it actually tried something different. So,
and then we had Primal, which was
Dawn?
kind of the spin-off of 4, using the same engine. Far Cry New Dawn, that's it.
New Dawn?
Yeah,
that's it. Yeah.
Yep. So but yeah, the notable thing that was sort of overshadowing the entire Ubisoft Forward conference was the fact that they didn't address the other big thing that's been going on for the last fortnight, and potentially a lot longer as it turns out. So now, rather than sort of digging into to sort of like the opening salvos of this stuff, I'm just going to sort of point to the most recent explanation of what exactly has been going on at Ubisoft that has just come out in the last few days. So Jason Schreier, who is a notable former Kotaku sort of games journalist who spent a lot of time sort of digging under the surface of various different companies in the industry to uncover pretty horrific stories of employee mistreatment and crunch and bad business practices and that sort of stuff. He's really made a name for himself in the last few years doing that. Now he's gone over to Bloomberg now, and he's actually working as part of their tech sort of reporting team, still covering video games and still sort of getting to report on the sort of stuff that he's best known for. And this is probably the biggest story that he's done since moving over there in recent months. And it's pretty much like a massive expose on what's been going on throughout the last decade at Ubisoft, sort of below the surface, and directly sort of follows up from the notable stepping down and dismissal of 3 key sort of high-ranking officials at the company in recent weeks after a huge amount of allegations started to come out from former staff members and people who've dealt with Ubisoft around incidents of harassment and sexual discrimination, and sort of getting caught up in a lot of the wave of Me Too allegations that are going on in the games community again at the moment. Like, we've had several waves of this, and this is just the most recent one. If you sort of pay attention to gaming news in over the last month or so, you must be living under a rock if you haven't seen this going on, because it's been pervasive across the board. This is probably one of the biggest ones that we've seen in quite some time, though, and it does sort of point to some pretty senior people in the organization being heavily involved, or at the very least turning a blind eye to it. And there's some pretty horrific allegations, and it really points to a corruption of the human resources department within the company that should have been defending some of these people. Really points to like an entrenched kind of culture of sexism at the company that has explained quite a bit when it comes to some of the strange decisions they've made around particularly like the Assassin's Creed franchise. It seemed like they literally had to have their feet held over like the fire to finally start having female protagonists in the games. And it's come out that Cassandra in Assassin's Creed Odyssey was one that some of the employees within had to fight tooth and nail for to actually get it past the creative director, who was of the very strong opinion that women just don't sell when it comes to those characters. So a lot of shit been going on for a long time. I'm not going to speak to too much of the detail in that article, but just be aware that it seems that Ubisoft has got some pretty dark shit going on in the underbelly, and you should read Jason Schreier's Bloomberg article, because it's a pretty full-on take on what's going on. He interviewed over 40 current and past staff there, some of which obviously and anonymously, but man, it doesn't make you feel very good about playing Ubisoft games, I'll just say that. So
it's really unfortunate, because like I had high opinions of Ubisoft and the way that they were taking franchises and like reimagining them and doing them better.
Yeah.
But then this has become obvious, and it's like any positive change that they've made, it's by people inside those studios that are fighting tooth and nail against management and human resources that are preventing them from making these positive changes that I have been enjoying, and it just makes everything sour. It's just like I love the fact that Cassandra's in the most recent games and everything, but the fact that she's only there because people had to fight tooth and nail against upper management for it just pisses me off.
Yeah, it's a weird thing because it's become sort of more and more clear that the Ubisoft as a company, a lot of people would have known this beforehand, but many wouldn't have too, and this kind of makes it clear to them. Ubisoft is essentially a family company. Like it's. Yes, it is a publicly listed company with a huge amount of shareholding from different entities. Tencent owns a pretty significant stake in the company, from what I understand, and other sort of businesses as well. But the five brothers that actually started Ubisoft back in 1986, the Guillemets, I think, pronouncing them correctly, they are essentially the controlling interest in the company. And Yves Guillemot, who's the CEO at the moment, is the middle of those five brothers. So it's always essentially kind of come back to the strengths associated with being a family-run business. They've had that sort of unity, keeping them together through thick and thin, and that hostile takeover that they managed to defeat a few years back. They have pulled together as a company. There's obviously some really good camaraderie that's come out of that, and a lot of people feel very comfortable. The fact that it's kind of been run by a tight-knit family as opposed to faceless corporate business people. But unfortunately, the flip side of that is that it's also got the negative connotation that comes with a family-owned business, in that there's also this inherent massive boys club inside that is really hard to crack open for certain people working in that organization. And unfortunately, it seems in this case that those people particularly are some of the female workers. So it just sucks. It's this sort of thing is way more pervasive in the games industry than many people realize. And, the more people like Jason Schreier that sort of actually go to the effort to uncover some of this stuff, I think the better. It's certainly not fun to read, but it's probably necessary to a certain extent. But yeah.
Well, thanks for setting up my news story, which is more bad news.
Awesome. Dish it on, lay it on.
Let's lay it on thick. So there's a mobile game that's a visual novel mobile game called Love Struck, which you can probably imagine what it is when I say it's a visual novel called Love Struck. It's a choose your romance kind of visual novel thing.
I can see the tagline is "Sin with me."
Yeah, something like that. Massively popular, like 22 million users back in 2014. Like it's a hugely popular mobile game. So it has 21 writers. All of them are contract, which for a visual novel just blows my mind. Like, how do you have all your writers be on contract rather than having these are our in-house writers? They complained of basically horrible work hours, being underpaid and such. Actually got together and formed a union, basically, just of the different staff within the organization, particularly the writers, kind of leading the charge on that. And basically what's ended up happening is they went to the business, which is called Voltage Entertainment, basically said, hey, we want better pay. And Voltage said, oh, that's unfortunate, and then fired all of them. Just outright kicked out 21 writers on their game, and then followed up by recently putting out a very it looks like it was written by a lawyer, because it's very much written in kind of lawyer-ese, but it essentially says so the 21 writers that we fired weren't essential employees. They were we let go of them because of the fact that they weren't essential. It's so fucked up. It's so massively fucked up. But this is the sort of thing that we're going to end up seeing a lot of game developers kind of up against in a lot of these businesses where, if they were unionized, they'd be able to make a bit more of a positive change. But then in this case, obviously, they've made the attempt and just been fired for it. But my hope would be that all of those writers end up landing far better jobs where they're not going to be mistreated so fucking strongly. Writers in the games industry have for a long time kind of had this really shit job of having to deal with they're a go-between game design and the programming teams and design teams, trying to make stuff fit, and you end up having to make a lot of sacrifices for the narrative that you might want to tell. And typically what ends up happening is big studios will basically have, this is our star writer, they're the one that we put on in front of whenever we're talking about our game, and then everybody else kind of falls to the wayside. They kind of end up not having great jobs. They're not paid particularly well.
Certainly
so in
like
this case, that this has happened.
I was going to say, in this case, it doesn't seem like the company's hard on money or anything like that.
No, not at all.
I can see a stat going back about 5 years or so that they've got like over 22 million paying users. So that's crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And like, what sort of monster running a company like this says, I'm not going to give you a pay raise, I'm going to fire you? Like what the fuck? Like, who are these people that are running a business like this? It's just insane to me. Yeah.
Yep. Well, one can only hope that that gets around and that they actually struggle to find anybody that will take up those roles. But we all know that's probably not true. So
that's a big problem with the games industry. Like, there will be a whole bunch of entry-level game developers that will jump at the chance to work on a game like that just to be able to have something on their resume.
Yeah.
I would hope that, they're smart, and I certainly, if any of my students were listening, and I would say them in class as well, don't work for shit companies. Like, if they're going to treat you like shit, don't give them your time. So.
Yep. Absolutely. Take control of your destiny. Absolutely.
Yes.
All right. And with that, let's segue into our main topic for tonight and actually talk about some lighter stuff. We're going to chat about exactly that tonight. We're going to talk about control. Specifically, we're going to chat about player agency. So I think, Matt, you kind of floated this idea, and it was largely due to the fact that a lot of the games that we've been playing recently had something of a sort of continuing theme with this. So what were your thoughts around sort of this as a topic?
Yeah, so this kind of came up because we were discussing the Last of Us 2, and I think we'll probably all still avoid spoilers tonight because it's still fairly recent. But the discussion kind of came out as a result of a lot of design choices they made about the Last of Us 2, where the narrative they were trying to tell flies in the face of who you are as a player, right? Like what you want as a player.
Yeah.
And so when we kind of talk about player agency, I'll get into game designy opinions later. I kind of want to hear from both of you first, but in terms of player agency for that game, like, it was very much like your agency was kind of interfered with because of the fact that it's like, this is the story we want to tell. Doesn't matter what you want. Like, this is the story we want to tell. And so player agency is having that option to be able to say, well, no, that's not how my story ends, right? Like, that's not how I want to see things pan out. And most of the time, when it comes to movies and writing, when you're writing something linear, you're making characters that are likable, or that the player can kind of, or the viewer, if it's a movie, can relate to in some respect. And there's nothing wrong with having horrible people kind of as your lead, because, like, we are also horrible people. It's just, you just have to have some way to kind of get into their shoes. And so player agency is basically like, I am satisfied I can exist as this character, and make decisions that make sense for them, without it kind of interfering. I think it was Adrian that had said about The Last of Us 2 that he had basically like rebelled against the story. I forget exactly what he had said, but he was like constantly throwing boss fights in The Last of Us 2 because it was like, I don't want to partake in this.
It's not the first time I've heard that. Yeah.
And so that is player agency, right? Like, if The Last of Us 2 let you actually throw that fight, that would be player agency. But that's not what you have in The Last of Us 2. It's basically like, this is the story that we're going to tell, and you are involved in it. Whether or not that's a good or a bad thing, like, I think you need to kind of get set up for the kind of experience that you're in for, essentially. But it's primarily a narrative tool. There are other places that kind of gets used, and I'll talk about that a bit more later on. But when you think of like player agency in games, like, what are the games that kind of like stand out for you, like, as ones that like you have a lot of agency as a player?
I think that there's quite a few, actually. And I would almost boil them down into two broad categories. I think that there's a lot of games where you have player agency that ultimately leads you towards the same destination no matter what you do. So a lot of the time, the agency is what transforms the journey around you, but it still leads you to the same endpoint regardless. And I think that, that's obviously a tricky thing in development because there's a lot of additional resources required and a lot of knock-on effects, particularly for serialized or sequeled games if you don't have the same sort of, destination endpoint. And that's a whole other topic we can explore a little, I guess. And then you've got the ones that your player agency actually does sort of branch out so that the end result of the choices that you make can actually guarantee that you have a vastly different beginning to end play experience compared to someone else. And they're the ones that I often really, really like, but they come with a lot of challenges and a lot of difficulties in terms of landing, like sticking the landing, I think. And there's a lot of games that don't necessarily do a good job with that. And I think that the couple that I'd use as an example, because they kind of relate very strongly to each other in that they do this differently, are actually Mass Effect 2 and 3 in particular. So Mass Effect 2, one of the most notable sort of elements of player agency you've got throughout the entire Mass Effect series is how kind of light and dark your character gets. Like you can be sort of a renegade, or you can be what's the other term they use?
Paragon.
Yeah, Paragon or renegade, and that alters a lot of the interactions you have with different characters and how they see you and the dialogue options and that sort of stuff. Now, ultimately, that system doesn't actually play out a lot when it comes to the final destination that you arrive at the end, except for relationships you've had with characters along the way. But what does count a bit more is that there are certain points where you actually make decisions that sort of result in the surviving or dying of key characters in that game. And particularly Mass Effect 2, when you go on the final sort of suicide sort of mission in Mass Effect 2, the way that ends up and then what you're left with when you start Mass Effect 3 can be vastly different from one person to the next in terms of who's alive in your team. Like you'll still have the same encounter, you'll still sort of beat the big bad, and the key aspects of that narrative will play out the same. But how much you sort of keep or lose doing that, it can actually change quite a bit. And I think that player agency is what actually has hit home for a lot of people when it comes to that being one of their favourite games ever, feeling like they've got control over how that plays out. But then we had this huge sort of uproar around the final end of Mass Effect 3 to close out the trilogy, because a lot of those sort of floating sort of points of narrative ended up all sort of being forced together into a convergence point, and that convergence ultimately didn't pay off for enough people, and that's why we had that huge uproar about that ending, and why BioWare actually did some work to kind of flesh that out a bit and make it more substantial, and it does ultimately sort of branch off again at the very, very end into a few different scenarios, which make it extremely fucking difficult to do a sequel in the same setting at the same timeline, which I thought was very, very interesting. It's like the whole game sort of, starts off here and then goes out like this and then branches out, and then sort of comes together at different points, then branches out again, comes together ultimately right at the end, and then right at the end it just does this again. Like very, very last bit, it sort of explodes out into a few different sort of end results again. Yeah.
I don't know what you're talking about, Luke, because I'm pretty sure that, like my experience of playing Mass Effect 3, the game just has a massive to be continued. Like
it totally does, yeah. And I respect creators that have the guts to actually kind of leave those things hanging up in the air and allowing the player enough agency to kind of, own the resolution themselves and like, this is my ending, this is my game. It creates some massive problems though. Like the other one that it's created huge issues with, and why we didn't really see like a follow-on sequel like a lot of people probably wanted was Life is Strange. So Life is Strange has a lot of decisions that you make throughout that game, and it's a very, very narrative game, of course. And the final ending of that game pretty much splits off into two vastly different directions, depending on what choices you make. And because Don't Nod sort of never... Well, they actually specifically came out and said, like, neither of these two is our canonical ending. Like, we don't necessarily endorse one over the other sort of thing. That meant that, because there's some massive things that impact the two main characters of that game, that kind of tied their hands as far as making a sequel goes. Like the fact that they gave player agency over to the people experiencing that meant that they couldn't then sort of take it back away from them by picking one of those 2 points as the natural starting point for the next game, because then it would make all of the choices that half of the audience had absolutely false. So I think that's where, as a developer and like a narrative writer for these sorts of games, it really makes it hard, because the more agency you sort of give over to the player, the less control you have as the creator, and you have to be okay with kind of giving that away for the sake of the experience, even though it's going to make it a lot harder for you to sort of, continue on past that point. So it's a tough call. I understand how tough it is for writers, and I respect the hell out of them. The ones that actually do it properly. So yeah.
Yeah.
Who are you, Christian?
I mean, I definitely agree with a lot of what Luke said. I think that, when I think of player agency, like Western RPGs are what comes to mind for me, and like older computer RPGs, stuff like the Baldur's Gate, Mass Effect, Skyrim, that sort of lineage of games tends to be, very customizable character, very customizable story, customizable outcomes and relationships. But I do want to say, in extension to that I don't think that player agency, I think there's more to it than influencing the outcome of games, right? I think that you can have games where you're not necessarily influencing major decisions, but as long as the actions that you are taking in the game feel like actions that you would naturally take, that you feel like you're in control of that, and that it's kind of an illusion, a comfortable illusion that you're going along with the ride, but you feel like that's natural and fits and is comfortable with you. Maybe there's a different term for that, but to talk about like The Last of Us, I think that was what was jarring, is that it didn't feel like a natural extension of the actions that like, not just that I would do, but that I felt like the game was like taking too much time and spending too much time moralizing and being a bit patronizing, and that I had already moved past that from like an entertainment experience, and I was sick of that message and that story that was being told to me. And so I guess that's not huge on the agency thing, but what was I going to say? My brain is a bit of a mess at the moment from too much Destiny.
I was going to say, all because of Destiny.
We can talk about Destiny with player agency for just a sec, if you like, because there's actually an example that I want to bring up in Destiny as well. There was one thing that they did, which I love the shit out of, for which lasted the entire season of The Drifter, which Matt referenced before, where there was like a quest that kind of dictated some of the narrative for that season, where you get to decide whether you want to side with the Drifter as a character who's running this shady sort of operation of Gambit and, sort of undermining the Vanguard somewhat with some of the shit that he's got going on. Or you could side with the Vanguard, and the rewards that you got as a result of that season sort of changed, and the story progression changes, and the game is very clear with you up front, sort of saying the decision that you make is going to have consequences, choose carefully. The thing that I think sucks about what they did for that decision throughout the game is that it only lasted that season. And we haven't really seen much about it since then. Now, I know that there's some dialogue stuff that changes in later content, which we chatted about recently, which dates back to when you make that call. And I love that. I think, more of that should be good, because I actually want that decision that we were forced to make to have, more meaning sort of leading on to the future, particularly as the Drifter becomes a more important recurring character in the narrative. But the fact that you can play multiple characters and kind of experience both sides of that, undermines it a little bit anyway as well. But when we were at PAX a couple of years ago now, and they actually had Victoria Dorbaum over, who's one of the sort of the head designers in the Bungie team. I can't remember what she's specifically in charge of. I think she's one of the creative directors. I'm not sure.
It was like the not DLC, like the seasonal content essentially. She was one of the creative directors in charge of that. I
actually asked her during that that presentation that they did, is there any intention from a development sort of position to kind of, progress that storyline any further and to increase the length of the agency that the players have from that decision? And she said, no plans at present, which really disappointed me at the time. I was like, fuck no, I want that to be more meaningful. And it's not to say they won't later on sort of pick that up again, because they've, under the hood, I assume they've still got all the player data about who chose what. But man, that was such a missed opportunity. I think like that they really could have picked that up and done more with it, and it would have been wicked. Yeah.
I remember what I wanted to say about The Last of Us 2 more now, which is, Matt, you mentioned film and TV writing, and I think that one of the things that's very difficult about having to, like, including some sort of player agency in games, having that be a necessary part of the formula in a lot of ways, is that it's much more difficult to write uncomfortable or sad or unpleasant stories in games, because with a movie, it's a passive experience. You don't have agency to in what's happening. So you can write movies that have, they're about miserable things like Schindler's List or whatever you want to pick, and that they can leave you feeling, not great, but then they're serving an artistic purpose and they have an important artistic value. It's not just there to make you feel good and happy. Whereas games, it's such an integral part of playing a game, has for so long been fun. It's always been, games are synonymous with fun. And the medium has matured now to a point where we are seeing a lot of games that aren't just about having fun and tickling parts of your brain that are entertaining, and they are more serious games and that sort of thing. But that is in conflict still, I think, and particularly when you get to a AAA space, there's less room at the moment for uncomfortable stories that make people feel icky, because people's expectation is this is just supposed to be fun because it's a game.
I would entirely agree. There's room in there for games that make us uncomfortable, right? Like for games where it's like, this person's an awful person. The issue is when you get like this cognitive dissonance where it's like, or narrative dissonance where it's like, the player character that I'm playing as, like, I don't agree with anything that they're doing, right? If they're just the worst person in the world, or their own actions can't really be justified, and it's clear like there's a narrative reason why they're doing that sort of thing, then it takes you out of the experience. And I think that there's absolutely room for those games where it kind of makes you kind of realize like this uncomfortable, like, this person's awful, but I can also see justifications for why they're doing it, right? Like playing an actually evil character that just does horrible things to people because they can with no justification sucks. It's deeply unpleasant. It's why most people, like one of the BioWare writers was talking about the fact that in Mass Effect, like you have the Renegade option there, but 90% of people choose Paragon. And it's because most of the Renegade options exist only to give value to the Paragon one. Because if the game was just his Commander Shepard being a good badass guy, it would be less interesting. Whereas the renegade decisions are there to give the player agency, right? So
I must have been one of the 10%.
I choose not to be a dick.
my Shepard was a bitch.
There are certain games out there. A lot of BioWare's earlier work was kind of just like, are you evil or good? Like that was kind of the binary decision, whereas games are a bit more complex now. And I think one of my favorite narrative games, we're talking about like this really visible kind of player agency that I wish the Last of Us devs would actually kind of look at for inspiration. Is actually Emily is Away 2. It's this little indie game on Steam, and it's deeply uncomfortable. I'm about to spoil it, so if you want to actually go play it, cover your ears. But in the course of the game, basically you're playing this character that is chatting with two girls over like AOL Instant Messenger. Like that's kind of the styling of it. And you make all these choices and how you interact with them. And by the end of the game throws back at you your decisions and kind of like tears the facade off and is like, you're a fucking awful person. And at no point along the way are you thinking, the decisions that I'm making, like I have full agency here, right? Like I am fully in control of my decisions. But then at the end, the game kind of points out that the decisions that you made were a dick move.
Yeah.
Like basically, the way it kind of pans out is like that you're talking to these two girls and you can basically choose to try and woo them essentially. And they're both very, very different people. And so one of them will be like, what's your favorite band? And you can reply with, oh, this is my favorite band. And then the other character later on might ask the same question, but obviously they want to hear a different answer. And so your instinct as a human being is lie, right? Like, oh yeah, no, I love that band. Oh yeah, they're great. But then at the end, like they kind of call you out on that. Like, you're a liar. You're an asshole. Like, what the fuck? And it's great. Like it is really, really satisfying to kind of have that like, oh shit, okay, well now I'm going to go back and replay it and not be a dickhead, right? Like I'm going to go through and like there's not really a happy ending to that game because like you either piss them both off along the way because like you have nothing in common, and like you're just being honest, or you piss them off at the end because you were dishonest. And so, yeah, like it's a really interesting kind of scenario, but only an indie game can do that, right? For The Last of Us to do that, there's potential things they could have done. Like if you're along on this journey, you're seeing the character making decisions, and you're like 100% fucking let's go, like let's get some fucking revenge, right? And you're in on that journey, and then they flip it, and you're seeing it from the other perspective now. And you're seeing how much of a butcher they become or whatever, then like that is a really satisfying narrative turnaround, right? It's like, oh shit, like I was a fucking asshole. Even if along the way you might be second guessing your decisions. And I think Destiny is kind of working up to that at the moment with a lot of their narrative. Not quite as deep as what The Last of Us is doing.
Well, it's a game that's not really designed for the same kind of storytelling. Yeah,
not at all. But certainly in terms of like, we're going to get darkness powers, right? Is that actually a good thing, or is the game kind of going to shine that back on us later on and say you accepted this, right? Like you happily let the darkness into your heart. Like, are you actually a good person for that?
Yeah.
Forsaken kind of asked that question towards the end, right? Like you've been on this journey for revenge. You've butchered these people. Now you've got an unarmed man in front of you that is absolutely guilty of crimes. Do you put a bullet in his head? Yeah. And the answer is yes. Like that is absolutely what your character does. And so like
I hate that trope in writing. I hate the trope in writing of the good guy killing 1,000 people to get to the bad guy. And then when they get to the bad guy, they think, is killing you really the right thing to do?
Yeah.
But they ignore the 1,000 people you kill on the way.
But I do like with Destiny that it leaves it vague, right? It cuts to black and you hear the gunshot, and whether it was you or Petra that pulled the trigger, that's your player agency,
and it
right?
gives rise to that famous voice line of, "Hey, did you kill Prince Udu? What's it?"
Yeah,
yeah, exactly. But you had said something earlier, Christian, and this is where I'm going to get game devy for a moment. You had said something earlier that you felt like player agency was a bit more than just those visible decisions in narrative. And I'd say 100% yes. I didn't do any research to see if there was any accepted terminology, because at the end of the day, like it'll be just somebody's terminology that they've adopted. But the terminology that I kind of use, and what we've been discussing primarily, is like macro level player agency. So like those very, very visible decisions, right? Where it's like, okay, well, how do I want this character to act, right? Do I want to go and steal this artifact or whatever, and then choosing not to has a different outcome from choosing to. So those are very kind of like large, visible, macro level decisions. But then there's another level below that, which is way less visible, and it's the kind of moment-to-moment, micro-level player agency, right? Where a game like Destiny has a lot of micro-level player agency. What guns are you going to use? What subclass are you running? What type of jump are you running around with? You're making decisions all the time in that game about what your moment-to-moment decision-making is going to look like, so that your playstyle is essentially quite different from somebody else's, right?
Yeah.
And that matters. Like those decisions along the way, that defines who you are. Even like choosing which shader that you put on your Guardian. Yes, it's very visible, but it says something about you, right? Like it is a representation of yourself. Like you're putting something through with that character.
Games that allow you to actually create yourself as an avatar, I think, really play into that quite well. Yeah.
Yeah. And so with like The Last of Us 2, like I think the reason why it's so jarring, and like every single game out there has some micro level of player agency. That's what video games are all about. It's about you making decisions. It's about you doing these things, right? And so The Last of Us 2, the reason why I think it's so jarring is the fact that you are making these decisions as the character, and you're choosing how to approach these fights. And you can choose not to kill a whole bunch of guys. You can choose to sneak past them. You can choose to just brutally go through and mow them all down. But then when it gets to the next cutscene, your agency is now taken away. It is now the writer's turn to tell you how this character is going to act. And there's a really, really great example for just like this dissonance between micro and macro level player agency that was not that long ago, which was one of the most recent Deus Ex games, where you could choose to be a character that was sneaky, and then you got to a boss fight, and you can't. Yeah, Human Revolution. Yeah. So you as a player are choosing how you play the game, but then when you get to boss fights, the game is expecting you to play it a very specific way. It's taking away your agency and saying, boss fight time, get your guns out. And it was such a bad, it was so problematic for that game. They actually had to patch it later on to allow stealth options in the boss fights. So like, how can you actually get through this boss fight and take the boss down only using stealth and only being non-lethal? Because those are decisions you get to make as a player.
I ran into that exact thing. I did a non-lethal playthrough of that game, and that had the problem, initially when I played it, where the achievement for a non-lethal playthrough is like, don't kill anybody through the whole game except for bosses. Yeah, is actually written down. Like, well, that's not a non-lethal playthrough. But
exactly.
But they had no way of. They hadn't built in a way around it at the time. But yeah.
Because like your playstyle is that micro level thing, right? Like you're making decisions in skill trees and such. But then macro level, obviously, a boss fight is really in your face. You don't if they don't give you options there, that sucks. Like, it feels bad. Yeah.
That micro macro level split, I think is awesome, and that actually really hits the nail on the head with the next examples that I want to just quickly give. Of I want to talk about 3 games briefly that I think play into that really, really well. But particularly because I think it actually is 3 really good examples of where the moment-to-moment gameplay, the micro-level decision-making actually has like a fairly macro-level impact on your overall game experience as a sort of tied-together piece. The first one that I want to talk about is Undertale. So Undertale is awesome for player agency in terms of the decision-making you make on a micro level, particularly around combat, because the way that the rest of the game plays out and the way that all of the other characters and the NPCs and things in that game actually, relate to you and react to you, and even on subsequent playthroughs, remember the shit that you did in your previous life, essentially, that all comes down to the decisions you make. And Toby Fox, did a fantastic job making every decision you made in that game actually matter when it came to how you play it, and hats off to him for how much player agency that actually built in, stealthily so too, because I think some of the funnest agency is when you actually don't realize how much control you've got, and then you find out later on that there's some real fucking consequences to some of the actions that you've made, which is great.
That game goes places with that aspect of it. It's awesome.
It's real good. It's definitely not one of my cup of tea games. Like, I actually fell off it pretty hard because there's other aspects of the game that aren't my usual sort of go-to, but I respect the shit out of it because of that aspect particularly. I think it's I know it's a really good game. It's just not one for me.
Same.
The other one that I also want to mention, which might come as a surprise, is actually from 2017, the remake of Prey. So Prey... Yeah. Prey... Contrasting to Undertale, Prey's a game that I actually fucking love. I think it's a really good game. I think it's severely underrated by a lot of people. And the composer's Mick Gordon as well, so, it's one of those things that speaks to me pretty deeply. But it's a game where, like, a lot of the decisions you make about how you're going to approach different things, you have a lot of agency over whether you go the sort of tech route or the stealthy route or the sort of, punch your way through route, from basic things like opening doors to locating objects to even the way you upgrade your character. And I think that the upgrade stuff in particular, because the game revolves around an alien species called the Typhon. And the way that you actually sort of interact with the Typhon, they're largely enemies. They largely seek to do you harm. But there is a category of upgrades in the game which actually involve taking small bits of the Typhon sort of gene and actually injecting it into your body through the eye. And it's, really gross and quite confronting when you do it. But it kind of comes down to, do you want to progress through this game being mostly human, or do you actually want to take on some of this alien species sort of DNA and actually become more than human so you can actually overcome some of these challenges and deal with them more easily? But the great thing about the agency they built into that is it's got massive consequences throughout the game too, because if you inject enough of this Typhon material into you, then things like the automated sentry turrets that are designed to detect aliens in different areas of the game, they start to realize that you're not fucking human anymore and they will fire at you. So the decisions you make have consequences immediately as you work your way through. And it kind of does reach a tipping point where you don't know how close to that line you're straying, and you sort of just need to judge it. But you definitely get advantages if you choose to sort of sip from the dark nectar, if you like, and it can play into the different multiple endings of the game, the decisions that you make throughout as well. And it's not kind of forecast in an obvious way too, that sort of says, this is the good ending, this is the bad ending, this is what you do to avoid this is what you do to avoid it. Actually, you have to kind of work it out yourself, which I love. I think it's really, really clever the way they do it. The third game I want to talk about is one that's not out yet, but I think we can all agree that the player agency aspect of this is one of the things that makes it most exciting, and that's actually Cyberpunk 2077. I think that the stuff that we're seeing for Cyberpunk, similar to what I've just mentioned with Prey, with regards to how you have a lot of different tools at your disposal and ways that you can approach different circumstances and challenges in the game, the way that that's going to tie into the way that your character actually gets built up and how you become as a protagonist in that game, I think that shit is going to be wild if they stick the landing. Like, there's a lot of good player agency that I can see coming with that thing, and I think that's largely why there's so much hype around it at the moment, because people are looking at Cyberpunk and going, this is going to be my experience, this is going to be my journey, and I cannot wait to take it. So but
there's games out there. I think Undertale probably does it best, where it's like it doesn't make it clear that there's repercussions for your actions, right? The way that you choose to play that game matters. And it will show you along the way that it matters. But then at the end is where it hammers it in. It's like, you fucking killed these people. Like, they're not coming back, right? You made those decisions. And there's a couple of games, like I'm pretty sure one of the Infamous games did it, where like you had this whole power tree where you could kind of go into it. You became way more powerful, but you also became way more evil. And it was kind of like dabbling with these things that you shouldn't be dabbling with. And it influenced kind of like how the game played out as a result. And Dishonored is a great example as well, but I feel like they kind of come forward with it too much, right? Like, I would love a game like Dishonored where it's like, hey, yeah, you can stealthily, non-lethally kill people, you can lethally kill people, however you want to play. And then you get to the end of the game, and it's like, you murdered like all of these fucking people, and the world is worse off for it, right? Like how you choose to approach things should matter. And I think that if that's a decision that you make moment to moment, it's more impactful than starting a game off and then outright making that choice at the start, right? There's a difference between making a whole bunch of decisions along the way versus one decision. Like, this is going to be my non-lethal playthrough of Dishonored 2. Like, those sorts of things, like that becomes then a micro level decision versus a macro level decision of, this is the style of game that I'm going to play this time around. It becomes a matter of like, what sort of person do I kind of want to be in this game? That's what I quite love, and what I think that Emily is a way to kind of nails in, is that, it doesn't make it clear that there's repercussions. You're just playing this little narrative game, you're interacting with these characters, and oh, by the way, your decisions actually mean something, fuck you. Like, I love that. I think that's actually really cool. But yeah, like it's one of those things where most games really make it obvious when your decisions are going to matter, right? And sometimes it's really deeply, like, it's actually quite satisfying to kind of see that. Telltale and the Walking Dead games, like, there's the whole meme around it, such and such will remember that. It's like, oh fuck, okay, well, this was a difficult decision, and yeah, I don't like the outcome, but now I potentially have to deal with those repercussions later on.
How do you feel about that being broadcast, though? Like, because I've got really mixed thoughts around it. Because I almost, when I play games like that, I almost want that information to be hidden. Because to me, it smacks almost like, it kind of highlights the desire for save scumming in a way. It's like the video game equivalent of when you're younger and you're reading those choose your own adventure books. If you're like most kids, like me, you'd read one of those books and you'd use every single digit on your hand to actually bookmark the pages at which you sort of turn to the different options so you can go back to it if you realize you made a fuck choice. You end up sort of redoing that part of the story to your liking ultimately. And to me, that's the same as what happens with a lot of video games which have multiple sort of endings where there's, clear good and bad endings where the decision points towards the end, because most people just end up creating a whole bunch of saves and then go and experience each of the endings anyway. So that you don't really have one definitive experience of that game. You kind of get to see it all. I prefer it to be hidden, I think. I prefer it to be, like, if there's consequences to your actions, don't make it easy to redo those actions and avoid the consequences. I think
I disagree.
Yeah? Okay.
Because I feel like when I'm playing a game like a Telltale game, I want to know where those decision points are so that if I choose to, I can see the other options and without feeling frustrating and time wasting. So if everything blurred together, I wouldn't know where those forks are. And and if I want to see all the content of the game I've bought, I've paid my money for, then I want to know how to find that content.
Do you at least accept that comes with a cost, though, of not sort of having as much of a satisfying sort of singular experience with that game?
I think that still depends on your personal play style, because I would never do that in the middle of a playthrough. So I would never go back. I mean, with the exception of Life is Strange, which is built into the system of the first one of actually rewinding and doing other choices. But with the Telltale game, I would never, until I finished the game completely, I would never go back and change my decisions. But if I'm doing a second playthrough, I want to know where are the branches. So I want to know. These are the points where now I'm going to choose the other thing. Now I'm going to choose the other thing, and I want that to be clear.
Yeah, I guess there are certain games that broadcast it very well. Like I'm just thinking in particular of Detroit Become Human, where they literally show you the map of
which I think it's awesome.
Yeah,
but I like that because it's like this is where I've been, but I have no idea where I'm going. Whereas, like, the issue I take with the way that Telltale does stuff is like, hey, I made a decision that pissed somebody off, and now the game is telling me that's going to have repercussions. Like, I don't want the game necessarily to tell me that. Obviously, I want to know when there's a decision that's being made. But I also think there's value. This is the sort of thing where it's like, give me different game modes, right? Like, give me a mode where it's like, I want to go in blind. I don't want the game to tell me when a decision is important, right? I don't want to know when something's going to potentially have repercussions. And in a little bit of a way that Dishonored does kind of give away the game there, right? Like you make some decisions like, oh, that's a dead branch, right? Like that's not going to actually lead anywhere, which is a little bit unfortunate. It's like, okay, well, maybe I shouldn't have bothered with that thing.
I don't like how Dishonored do their choices.
Yeah.
I don't like that combat is a bad thing in that game. Like
exactly. Like imagine I have this fantasy world where I didn't know that choosing a non-lethal playthrough in Dishonored would get me the better ending, right? Because the game tells you that pretty much outright. Let me fucking play it. Let me go, why the hell are there more rats around, right? Let me get to the end of the game and then go, oh fuck. That'd be amazing. Like I would love that experience. But I also realize that's not for everyone, and that some people are going to want the game to respect their time and it'd be like, no, tell me up front. Like if I'm making decisions that are going to result in a worse ending, fucking tell me, And so I think that there's room for both in narrative games, because in the grand scheme of things, like if it's Telltale style where it's like this person will remember that, it's literally just toggle that off. Like don't tell me. I don't want to know when somebody's going to remember that shit. But I also do like the mechanic existing, right? It's up to the person to kind of decide whether or not they get the information.
I must admit, I do like how I recently experienced it in Persona 5, where like some of those critical decision points in the game, which do ultimately lead to different endings, at the point where those happen, it does sort of say to you in a way that doesn't break narrative, you feel like you should consider this decision carefully. Yeah, you know, and
Yeah.
some of those are actually revolving around, you know, who you actually start to form romantic relationships with, because you realize that, and it's pretty obvious that if you pick one person and then you know, are not happy with that choice, then you're going to be in a sticky situation, which, you know, makes sense. But then you can ultimately actually go and fucking date everybody if you want to anyway, and, you know, minor spoiler, there's actually some fucking hilarious scenes that crop up later if they discover that you've been doing that. So,
Yeah, like I'm going to briefly mention the game that we're working on at the moment, because this is one of those things where micro level to macro level, it is a game where if we come out right at the start and tell people what they should expect, that's going to better prepare some people that have never played the sort of game that we're making, right? And so for a lot of people, they're going to want that option, because otherwise the thing is going to be inaccessible to them. They're going to be going, why is this so garbage? You know, this fucking sucks, without understanding that being the intent, right? Whereas that you're going to have that other group of players that are like, I've played alternate reality games and I want to be completely fucking blind. Like, don't tell me anything. Let me figure stuff out on my own. Let me solve the puzzles. Versus those players that will want tooltips, that will want to be told, okay, this is a work of fiction, and you're going to be going to websites and such to be able to finish this game.
Sounds almost like a difficulty setting, but not a difficulty setting. It's more of a... Yeah.
It's a narrative setting.
Yeah.
Like it's like what sort of story do you want to be told here? Do you want a video game, or do you want something that you can kind of immerse yourself in? And yeah, like it's a really interesting kind of push and pull with games like this, where you do like the reason I think that I keep on mentioning it because I fucking love it, and it's such a brilliant underrated game. But Emily is Away 2 is so short that it's like an hour and a half, 2 hours to get through the story and then see the repercussions and go, I'm gonna fucking fix it. You start over and you do it again. Whereas like if I'm investing fucking 70 hours into a Mass Effect and then I find out at the end that I made a renegade decision that fucked over the universe, I'm gonna be pissed. So yeah, it needs to be projected in some cases, absolutely.
Yep.
I want to speak up for all the people who don't like, who, you know, not all games need to have decisions in them, right? Like you can have a game that's just fun to play, and and not all games need this high degree of player agency. It shouldn't be expected of every game. You know, Uncharted has a story to tell, and there's no branching endings, that sort of thing. And so, like most of my favorite games, I think a lot of my favorite games are there's no big branching paths and alternate endings. They're just the stories that the creators want to tell, and that's fine. And I don't think that there's not every game needs to have this.
Yeah.
No, it's 100%. It doesn't make a game worse or better for having it. Because I entirely agree. Like the Uncharted series is one of my favorite fucking game series, and your agency is which gun do I shoot the bad guys with?
Which do I hide behind?
Yeah, exactly. Like that's basically your agency in that game. But the reason it works so well is that the character's charming, and you can totally see yourself in his shoes. So, like, I think that's the way you get immersed in that, and that's perfectly fine.
100%. So it's also, you know, like saying that games are better than movies because they give you more choice, but that's not true because some people like movies. You know, it's like sometimes people like to have the story given to them from the point of view of the creator. Some people like to create their own story. Neither is wrong.
Movies have player agency as well. You choose whether to go and see them, and quite frankly, I feel better for not seen any Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle movies. So.
The last two are not terrible. Okay. I mean, they're better than the Transformer films that they did, that's for sure. Yeah.
I'm just saying, I'm satisfied with the outcome of my player agency in that.
Yeah, that's fine. I understand. Nice. All right. Well, that's player agency. That was a good chat. I enjoyed that thoroughly. That was really cool. Yeah. If anyone out there listening wants to have more agency in the sorts of game kind of design or sort of philosophical topics that we cover like this, then you actually can take a role in that too by suggesting some to us. So we're happy to take any sort of listener suggestions, and if there's a topic that you think's interesting that maybe we haven't actually covered significantly in the past in the last 220 plus episodes, let us know, because that could actually be the way that you influence the outcome of future episodes by maybe hearing us discuss that thing. So that'd be kind of cool. I'd like to do a bit more of that. Yeah. But yeah.
Luke will remember it.
Yeah, that's right. I will remember it. I promise I will. Yeah. Cool. Well, that's the show anyway. You can get hold of us at all the usual places if you want to give us your ideas. So send an email through to mail@partyloaded.com. Hit us up on Twitter at partyloadedshow. We're on Facebook, of course. Just search for Party Loaded, and you can find links to all of our other everythings at our main hub at channelendgame.com. Catch us back here every Wednesday night, streaming either the show or some gameplay of some variety at 8 p.m. Western Australia Standard Time on twitch.tv/partyloaded. We haven't made a decision around next week, though, Matt, have we? What are we thinking?
Not yet.
No.
But we have been talking about Halo, so I'm probably going to drag you into something there.
That's a possibility, yeah. There was a bit of whispering around some Minecraft at some point, but
Minecraft as
You're
well.
twisting my arm pretty hard, too. I don't know. We'll talk about that.
Look, I have to get you through a Halo game, so, like... whether or not it's Reach, like I might let you just go and play Reach twice.
I think I'd prefer it to be something other than Reach, because that's the one that, given that I've already commenced, I would want to finish and have that as like a solo experience. But yeah,
absolutely,
yeah. But I don't know. But that being said, we'll be playing more Destiny together as well, not necessarily on stream, although we might, just keep an eye on the Twitter. And if we decide to do an impromptu stream because we've got everybody wanting to run a raid and we want to do it, then, you'll get the notification there. So we ended up doing 2 4-hour streams last week, which were not necessarily planned ahead of time to be that. And, it was quite a bit of content if you want to sit through the whole thing, which, probably you shouldn't, because nobody should do that. So it was super frustrating. I can guarantee people were watching us going, what are these dickheads doing? Anyway, yeah. But the payoff was all worth it. All right, anyway, absolutely. That's it. Gentlemen, thank you very much again. Fantastic week.
Buy Necrobarista in 10 minutes.
Everybody, go buy Necrobarista and enjoy.
Apparently, we've been wrong twice. It is coming out in 10 minutes.
Okay, fuck, I don't know anymore. I'm just going to go and play it. Talk about it next episode. Anyway, thanks everybody. Hope you enjoyed the show, and until next time, good night.
Good night, gang.
The Party Loaded podcast is a Channel Endgame production. For this and more great gaming content, bookmark channelendgame.com.